Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Rams Review podcast with me and Corey. Corey, hello.
Jason, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. And today, as football has finally finished for a couple of weeks, today we can bring you an exciting interview with none other than Mr. Chris Coles from BBC Sport at Derby. Chris, good afternoon to you. How are we?
Jason, Corey, afternoon. Yeah, really good, thanks. Really good. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Chris. Appreciate it.
It's, I'm guessing probably for a little bit of all of us. I appreciate, Chris, you do obviously more than just cover the Rams on radio, but obviously for me and Corey, speaking football 24/7, as we've just been talking about off air, it's nice to actually do a bit of an interview. And whilst this interview will obviously be based on football and certainly Derby County, there'll be a bit more of a light-hearted feel about it as well. So it won't be constant, but we'll start off talking with Derby. Obviously now it is pretty much done. Isn't it the playoff final tomorrow?
I think it's Tuesday.
Yeah. Right. I've just finished watching Notts County and Harrogate in the National League. That was an interesting game. But so it's obviously finally to our season. It's finally gonna put pay, and well, we're one team away from knowing obviously who's going to be in that 24 for beginning. Well, probably in about 4 or 5 weeks time, I think it is, that they've announced. So it's not long. Let's put it that way. Chris, in a few words, obviously Derby's season. I mean, we've covered it a lot, obviously, on this podcast with everything that's gone on. If you can sum that up in a few sentences, what do you think to Derby this season?
A few sentences, yeah.
Could take a few podcasts, couldn't it? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Unforgettable, I think, for the reasons that you probably wouldn't think of. You look back at Derby's seasons previously, and you'd think, well, actually, they've every season there's been something quite dramatic, whether it be reaching a playoff final, whether it be getting rid of managers and the turnover of players. But yeah, the 1920 season, we were thinking, well, making our little end of season montage that went out in the final program that we did. I finished it, and it was about 12 minutes long. Just the magnitude and all the events that have happened. And we couldn't think of anything really that didn't happen. If you were trying to write all the things that could happen to a football club, you'd include, well, manager changes, in comes a continental manager, Derby's first, Wayne Rooney arrives. Normally that would be the story of the season. Then you have the off-field incidents with Tom Lawrence and Mason Bennett, then Richard Keogh, who gets sacked. Then you get the proposed takeover, or at least the investment. You had stories of players not getting paid. The record signing gets injured for the entire season. That was almost lost, actually, Christian Bielik's injury, because of everything that was going on. Then you had the EFL charge. You had poor old Andre Wisdom getting attacked in Liverpool. And then still Derby somehow could still make the playoffs. And this is even before you get to coronavirus and the rest of it. So it'll certainly be a season that I think fans will never, ever forget. And what shouldn't be lost, actually, is Derby finishing 10th, despite everything that happened, was a pretty good effort, actually. And I think if you take all the off-field stuff out, 10th felt right, because they struggled against the better teams in the division, as we saw in the final, 4 or 5 games of the regular season. But they were a step ahead then of the teams that you'd expect them to beat, which is why 10th felt reasonable. Throw in the fact that Bielik wasn't there, so your record signings out for such a long time. The virus didn't help Wayne Rooney, who was pretty much hitting. I know he missed the Blackburn game before the pandemic, but he hit good form, good rhythm, had to kind of start again, and you just felt the back end, he was shot and he looked absolutely shattered. Obviously, was at fault for a couple of the goals. So I think all in all, to finish 10th, despite everything that's happened, I think you have to say that's a good job, Phillip Cocu, and let's hope. And I know there's the potential of a rather nasty EFL charge on the horizon, but who knows when and how bad that'll be. Hopefully there'll be a reasonable time for Phillip Cocu just to have a spell without any off-field drama. But yeah, just a bonkers season, and one that we'll never forget.
I think something that me and Corey were saying on our last podcast, a point that you've made there, 10th did feel right, like you say. Take everything away, the squad just fell short from that top 6. And to be fair, it was something that we said going into obviously the next season, which obviously we know isn't too long away. You're not long away from the coalface as such. Actually, going into a season, this season is going to be quite different for Derby fans. We've got the same manager, And I actually don't think expectation, although we've played some good football this season and there are a lot of positives to take out of it, obviously, with the youngsters, I don't think we're actually going into the next season necessarily expectant of, you've got to be in the playoffs. We said, again, any team worth the salt in this division wants to be challenging up there, if they're good enough to or not. Your ambition has to be to challenge. But for me personally, I do go most weeks. I do feel like the expectations just a little bit lower going in, and I've got a feeling that might actually help. Settle down, get the start of the season going again. Obviously, by the looks of things, with obviously what the government have announced, the fans back into the stadiums, which I think was a bit of a long shot anyway, probably for October time. That's probably now not going to happen, and things like that. So it's going to be a bit of a same old for all clubs, of course, but just getting back into the rhythm of that, back into a new season with only 3 weeks off of football, 2 weeks off before back into pre-season. That actually might just help them, settle in a little bit more instead of a 30,000 crowd on that first day, expectant and things like that. And I think, whilst we want positives for Derby, me and Corey both want obviously Derby to do well. We are realists. We appreciate that at the end of this season, Derby weren't one of the best sides in the division. They were middle of the row, and something that I said, next season, I'm not expectant of them doing anything incredible. The season after, if everything goes to plan, obviously Cocu stays, the youngsters don't get poached away, and things like that. Maybe the season after would be one where we could definitely sit there and go, oh wow, we're building something special here. And I'm sure, Chris, being in the job that you are, and obviously doing the phoning and things like that, some Derby fans expect the world, unfortunately, and it doesn't. Obviously, we've got to be realistic, and we're not in that position. Going into obviously the season coming up, do you think it's the same kind of feeling that we've got? It's it's a wait and see, really, and like you said, mentioned in your previous comment, hopefully a 12-month period where it's just absolutely drama free once the EFL charge is out of the way.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's stability is so important in football. I think you mentioned it earlier on in your last answer. And you look at the teams that tend to flourish in the Championship and go on to do well in the Premier League. I know Norwich have just come back down, but you could argue that they were probably a step ahead of even themselves. They didn't expect to go up the season that they did. But the teams that did go up, Sheffield United being absolutely the case in point, Chris Wilder built a team there, and that team had been together for such a long time. They played together through League One, a couple of seasons in the Championship, and brilliant finish in the Premier League. Norwich, likewise, the foundation was the youngsters there that had been slowly building, and then up they went quite against, well, in the face of anyone's prediction. I think anyone had Norwich finishing top of the table 2 seasons ago. And the teams that have gone up this season, Leeds, as much as we hate to say it, that team that started the season was pretty much the team that ended the season. And they went on and did it, and they should have done it last season, really, or this previous season. You look at the starting 11 for Derby against Huddersfield, and it was almost completely different because, obviously, Mason Mount went, Fikeo Tomori, Harry Wilson. But obviously the manager, and the manager's always the big one. And I think it's Nigel Clough the last time Derby started. I know Gary Rowett sort of ended his half season and then started the full season, but the last time a manager had 1 full season and then a second full season, you've got to go back, 7 years?
Yeah, that's too much.
Exactly. Speaks volumes. So I think that's the most important thing. Phillip Cocu has now a season, although, again, it's not going to be a full pre-season. Can't count last year because he was flown into, to America, and Corey, the American weather let him down by all accounts because it just rained constantly.
I don't know why they picked Florida. I mean, what did they think was going to happen? I mean, I'm looking outside, Chris. I was just doing some gardening this morning, and it's like 95 degrees with 90% humidity. It's just god awful. And you go down to Florida, and it's like a swamp. It's just like, I don't know who thought, hey, this would be a great idea. Okay, I know from my perspective, it was a bit of a, I heard, oh, they're coming to Florida, and I thought, okay, should I road trip down? That was my first thought. I thought, I'm going to pack the car up, I'm going to go down, I'm going to just, and then my actual brain kicked in. I thought, wait a minute, let's pump the brakes here, because I'm going to go down there and there's going to be thunderstorms and stuff, because I know what the weather's like, and Yeah, and I ended up watching our Rams TV, and they were like, "This game's over after 10 minutes," and I was like, "Well, good job I didn't go." And then they played like a weird 9 a.m. kickoff against Bristol City, like an hour, and it was like, okay, I'm glad I didn't go down there then, and whatever. So, yeah, it was just bizarre, and it felt to me, and I think we've talked about this before, and I think it's probably well known, Chris, you probably know this, like that preseason was more set up for Frank Lampard than it was for a new manager. Like he set that up. And then they were like, "Oh crap! Well, we've got a new manager. Oh, yeah, we've got this other place that we have to go to. We can't get out of it. So, sorry, And that always felt like we kind of felt haphazard and kind of not. I hate to use the term unprofessional, but that's kind of what it felt like. They were in there. I saw some videos of them training, and there's like kids on the next field and whatever. And I mean, there's a lot of nice places in America that you could go to do a training camp, that you could be in complete seclusion and drive. I mean, think about it. The university I went to, which is 20 miles outside of Washington, D.C., they could rent the facility there, and they could drive to Philadelphia, D.C., and Richmond and play 3 games right there. But, to go all the way down to Florida just seemed kind of a bit of a weird one. Obviously, it wasn't Phillip's fault. And I think I read this week that he had planned on a European kind of base this year for Derby, but obviously now it's going to be shifted domestically. Am I right with that?
Yeah. No, I mean, this is it. I mean, what didn't help, obviously, is that the preseason had been set up quite far in advance, and then Frank Lampard got embroiled in his Chelsea talks, and I think all the intricate planning then that would have happened for pre-season just didn't happen, because obviously Frank's mind was elsewhere. Deep down knew he was going to go to Chelsea, and therefore all the planning for pre-season just wasn't done. So that's why when they arrived, there were things that weren't in place, and the training schedules were a bit all over the shop. And obviously the games against Bristol City were, as you say, the weather put pay to one of them, and they had to come back. And it was just, you can get away with it if the squad have been together for a while and the manager knows the squad. But when you're just dropping him in there, and he signed his contract and straight on a plane and off he went, not ideal. And then we know the troubles that they had in the transfer window and the loanees that just didn't work. Jamie Patterson and Kieran Dowell, who's just gone to Norwich actually, which is an interesting one. But yeah, everything that happened during that summer, I think it was amazing. Actually, they won that first game and looked so good winning that first game, because we weren't expecting it. We thought to have that pre-season and to go into that knowing that, well, Huddersfield just come down, and they played really well. They deserved to win. Obviously, Wayne Rooney then he signed the next couple of days. He thought, oh, maybe then Derby can just carry on this momentum that they got from the previous season. But yeah, I just felt very sorry for Phillip Cocu, and pleased now that fingers crossed he can just have, as he's joked with us quite a few times, wry smiles the last 2 weeks that we spoke to him. He just said, just as long as it's less dramatic off the field this time around, it'll be great. And for him, just he's dealt with it so admirably and so gracefully, and everything that he's had to answer, he has done. And I think that's why fans have bought into him now, because they were a bit unsure, but now I think they're right behind him, because he's just been so graceful when lots of other managers wouldn't be so, and would go, well, look at this happened, and that's why we're not very good. And never once did he blame anything else. So yeah, I like him, and I think given the tools and the time, he could do something really special.
That leads me into my next question, but onto your point that you just mentioned, talk about a weird season. Kieran Dowell turns into Ronaldo for like 3 weeks. I mean, what if the season couldn't get any more weird? It was Kieran Dowell scoring like 3 or 4 goals for Wigan in 15 minutes or whatever. Looked like a completely different player. But yeah, you just mentioned it there, Chris. Obviously, you speak with Phillip Cocu on a somewhat pretty regular basis. You just touched on it, but when you sit down with him, what's he like as a person, as a man, and what impresses you most about him?
I think he comes across, as you actually see him, he is very thoughtful. So when you speak to Phillip Cocu, you're not going to get a soundbite. You're not going to get again, it's easy to compare managers, but Frank Lampard, because he'd had his media training, he lived in the Premier League spotlight for such a long time, so he realised that everything that he says is magnified, which is why his press conferences would be busy, because the national press knew that he'd give us quite a nice line and it'd be Frank Lampard, so it would carry much more weight, which is why us as the local media got a little bit frustrated, because we'd arrive for a press conference away at Preston on a Tuesday night, and the national media would turn up and it would be, right, Frank, Eden Hazard looks like he's going from Chelsea. How big a move? And you're thinking, well, fine, I get why we have to go through this, but but this is not particularly useful for any of us. And Frank knew what he was doing. His answers were always 30 seconds max, and he'd make a jokey point, and then he'd go, no, in all seriousness, now it's this point. And he knew what he was doing. Philip is different, and I think that's why fans maybe at the start didn't really buy into him, because he was considered, and he loves his football. And if you're talking to him about football and formations and tactics and players, you can speak to him for hours, and he'll happily speak to you for hours, because he loves that side of it. He was less keen on all the other bits, which he knew was going to come, especially when Derby were so busy with their extracurricular activities. But he's very considered, and he'll always think about his answers. He won't rush into anything. And he's just, I'll use the word, he is just very graceful and just admirable in the face of everything that had happened. Never once did I see him lose his cool. Never once. And despite them routinely going to London and getting beaten 3-0, the only time I saw him with a little glimmer was when Derby lost 3-0 at Brentford. You might remember, being beaten by Forest, and Philip had played a very weakened team, or at least a young team. And I think fans, you guys will know, you'll have your own opinions, and some still say, no, you play your full team against Forest, whatever. But he said at the time that fans sort of said, okay, we'll just about forgive you for Forest, but make sure you go and beat Brentford away. And Derby are 3-0 down at half-time, playing abysmally. And that's the one time I've seen him get a bit angry. And I think he used the word arrogant. He said, this team are arrogant for no reason. A lot of fans, I think, resonated with that and thought, yeah, I don't know why we're pretending that we're sort of Barcelona because we haven't got the right to play. But everything else, so the Richie Keogh sacking and the drink driving incident and the EFL charge and the investment talk and the transfer window. You remember that at the start of the transfer window in January, he said, I want 2 signings. I want a defender and I want a winger. And he was pretty confident of getting both. Didn't get them. How many managers do we know that come February the 1st would have gone, well, we wanted this and we're not getting it, and then would just sulk a little bit and throw their toys out the pram as if to create a kind of, well, this is why we're not doing so well. Didn't do that once, Phillip Cocu. Never once. Just said, look, this is the way it goes, and this is the challenge we have, and this is the tools we have to work with. So I think that resonates with players too, because if they look at Phillip Cocu, who is this even-keeled manager that will never get too high when Derby win, he'll never get too low when Derby lose, and I think players, modern-day players, react to that much more than Frank in his early days would be cloud 9 when Derby won. But good luck interviewing him when they lost. He was, 2-word answers at most, because he felt it like a player. And I think he learned then going into his latter part of the season that you can't do that. You have to be Mr. Even as a manager. And Phillip Cocu is. And I think that's why he gets the respect that he does from everyone, players, the media, and I think fans certainly at the back end of the season realise that they've got someone who's a great patron for the club, and someone they can be proud to say, yeah, this man is my manager, because of how classy he is.
So with your conversations, obviously, with people that you've talked to and your sources and everything like that, and you don't need no divulging names or anything like that, but do you think there's a sense around the ground now within the, I hate to say the terminology, but the boardroom, the front office of Derby, that Cocu will be given the time? Or is it, if they're still playing inconsistent football without much week by week progress, and we sit here, let's say, and we're sitting around November, December timeframe, is his head on the chopping block?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things to that, Corey, probably, and Jason's in a great position to answer this too, because of going week in, week out. I think, and Jason, by Christmas, it was a little bit tetchy, wasn't it? I think it's fair to say that Pride Park, there was a divide, and certainly, the 3-0 defeat at Reading, which was the game before Christmas, and Derby were sort of 17th, 18th, a few points into the relegation zone. There was a nastiness in the air. Nastiness is not the right word, but I don't think this is the right guy for Derby. Obviously, not all fans thought that, but it wasn't a happy place, and the atmosphere was a little bit subdued. And the reason I say a couple of things is because financially now Derby do have to be very, very careful, and Mel Morris has come out and said quite regularly now that the championship isn't sustainable, and from what Mel Morris has done with Derby and the finance that he has that he's put into Derby, he knows that this can't carry on. And the reason why Derby are in a battle with the EFL is because they are in difficulty. You know, you don't sell your stadium the way Derby have, even though it's completely legal and other clubs have done it. You don't do that if the club is financially stable. So because Mel has thrown lots of money at lots of different things, players and managers, I think he's now realised that if Derby are to move forward and be self-sufficient and survive, you are going to have to maybe bite the bullet and go, okay, I need to choose one man that I trust for a period of time, and then we'll see what happens. So it won't be a, right, who's next in through the door? Okay, Darren Russell comes in. Oh, yeah, okay, fine. Steve McLaren can come in. Yeah, okay, you did well. No, next. Nigel Pearson, oh, that didn't work. Right, next. Oh, Steve McLaren back in. No, Gary Rowett, yeah, I like it. Right, he moves to Stoke. Frank. So I think Mel has realised that you can't keep going through all of this change, because you end up in the position that Derby have been in so often, where you've got one manager and you've got 4 managers players. Again, I think there was a game, I think last season, where I think there was maybe 5 manager signings. I think there were Rowett players, Lampard players, a Pearson player, and a Clough player. And you just think this is why Derby are in the position that they are. So I think, and 5 years, of course, Phillip Cocu got as well. So I think this is Mel saying, you have my backing now, unless it goes absolutely terribly and Derby at rock bottom after 20 games. I think he recognises what Phillip does with the youngsters, recognises that they've got some real talent coming through. Louis Sibley, Max Bird, the 2 that are always top of that list. Obviously throw in Jason Knight. There's some real excitement about some of the other youngsters coming through as well. And the other side of that, if Phillip Cocu's on a 5-year deal, it's going to cost a lot of money to sack him, and it's just money that Derby don't have at the moment. So I think there is an acceptance that this has to be a long-term thing, and Phillip Cocu will be there for as long as Phillip Cocu needs, unless it all goes horribly wrong. But I think certainly from this season, Mel and Stephen Pearce as well have been very, very happy with what Phillip Cocu has done. So no, I suspect that, even as Jason says, the expectation for this season isn't as high. So let's say it is, I know it's the dreaded T word, but let's say it's another transition season and Derby finish mid-table and it's a few, ups and downs. I don't think, Mel Morris and Stephen Pearce at the end of the season will be thinking, right, we need to change to get to the next level. I suspect that, as I say, unless it goes disastrously, and I mean disastrously, then Phillip Cocu's here to stay.
Yeah, just to pick up on your point, Chris, like you say, I think that after that Reading game, I think if it wasn't for the fact that we knew Wayne Rooney was coming in for that Barnsley game, yeah, I think he could well have, he would have, and I appreciate it wasn't really a signing, but he could well have found himself without a job. But like you said, from those points that you've just mentioned there, the amount it would have cost to get rid of him and things like that. But let's face it, that would have been an expense, but this club dropping into League One, especially with now what we know has happened in that last 6 months of the year, it probably would have been absolutely catastrophic, and we could find ourselves in a Bolton-esque situation within 18 months, and obviously we don't want that. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, as you say, from the noises on the terraces, if you will. He came in, and I think you're right. When you've had, and it's something obviously me and Corey have spoken about, and obviously he does know without being there every week. Like you said, Chris, the type of managers that Derby have had actually in the last 4 years, they've all been a very interesting character. Gary Rowett is definitely an interesting character. Frank Lampard is definitely an interesting character. Phillip Cocu comes along as this cool, calm, I think classy. The word classy that you used earlier is right. It's professional and it's classy. It's smooth. And I think a lot of that, like you say, I think a lot of that took its time to get through to the fan base, because the football wasn't fantastic at the start. Like you said, that Huddersfield game was a bit of a first game was like, oh, okay then, and then it obviously just nosedived from there. In all fairness, for a few games, and yeah, it was a bit like that. But I think is with everything that's gone on, many of other managers have like you say, they sulk. They've been sacked for less. It's all bringing all that in together. I do think he is here for the longer term. And I mean, I'd hate to think what would actually knock him off his perch, if that's the right terminology, because everything thrown at him, this season. It's incredible that he's still got a smile on his face. I noticed about Christmas time he was going a little bit grayer. The beard got a little bit longer. As I think that's just the Derby way, as they say. But yeah, no, I'm certainly optimistic going into next season. I say I've never really been one to say, oh, this team should be challenging all the time. I appreciate what's going on the pitch, and yeah, I'm just looking forward. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes. To be perfectly honest with you, which technically moves me on to my next point to talk about Derby for a minute. Obviously, incomings, we've seen Mike Taveric come in, a position that I think is fair to say, we needed. We needed some strength. Obviously, Matt Clark's future lies wherever Matt Clark's future lies at this moment in time. One of the things that I was talking to Corey about the other day, Chris, and it's something that you probably will have picked up on at Derby. Our scouts don't seem to have much of a passport. And it's the first season, and I appreciate why every Dutch Tom, Dick and Harry is being linked with us because of Cocu. But it's really nice to be, for a change, linked with those that little bit of foreignness about the side. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've seen it work fantastically well at certain clubs, Wolves probably being the standout one over recent couple of years, or you could go the complete opposite way and sign 11 foreigners, and it just doesn't work. Moving, obviously the style that Cocu plays, not too many, I would say, teams play that way in England. So if the English players don't play it, they're going to struggle in some respects to fit into that. So I think getting people from out over in Europe who do play this style of play a bit more is obviously going to be key. Obviously, in the last 2 days, obviously Mr. Chris Martin has decided to part company with Derby for at the moment. Anyway, let's put it that way. And one thing that we said, we got Taveric tied down. Goalkeeper has to be something that Derby sort out this summer.
Yeah.
And then, if possible, it was a winger and a striker just to add. I would actually probably argue now that not re-signing Chris Martin makes a striker probably the main priority in the system that he plays, unless he's going to change the system to fit in Jack Marriott, to fit in whatever else. And he makes a slight change. Me and Corey, we were talking. I've got a sneaking suspicion we might see certainly 3 at the back for Derby next season, and play Jayden Bogle a little bit further forward with what he can do, and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think all of a sudden, you in a very short transfer window, whilst a goalkeeper is important, I think Kelly could. Personally, for me personally, I think he could do a job next season, no doubt about that. But trying to, as we've seen this season, when Chris Martin wasn't in the team early on, and when he's been in and out a little bit, obviously he's had to be rested and things like that. Derby County chalk and cheese when he's in that side. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, but I appreciate a lot of people kind of think the same. One of the things I've always said about Chris Martin is a very unorthodox target man, because the man can do things with his feet that normal 6'4" old up guys you don't normally do, and getting that type of player in at 24, 25 that probably need that little bit of experience to play in the Championship aren't necessarily from England or where are going to come in on a free. I appreciate that we have been linked with a couple, and I'm not going to put conspiracies out there. I'm sure we'll get linked with many names. But in terms of the transfer window, do you think the momentum does shift a little bit now Chris Martin has left, because it is starting to look a little bit weak up there?
Yeah, I agree. I think Chris Martin, as you say, the system and the way Phillip Cocu likes to play, having that focal point up front has always been an important part of the way Phillip Cocu plays. It's very easy to label it as the Dutch way of playing. It involves having that person up front, and you look at Phillip Cocu's previous teams. Historically, he has had someone like that. He had Jurgen Locadia, who's now at Brighton, albeit hasn't really featured as his hold-up man. He's had Luc de Jong in the past, and Chris Martin fits into that. So yeah, the fact that he hasn't agreed terms is a blow, and the club wanted to keep him, no question, and Phillip Cocu did want to keep him. I think Chris Martin wanted to stay, and I think because of both of those stances, it's why there was an impasse, because the club sort of thought, well, we know you want to stay, but there's no way we can give you anywhere near the nice juicy salary that Steve McLaren gave you 5 years ago. So we're going to just offer you, considerably less. And then Chris Martin knowing, you want me to stay, and I know you've got a problem up front. That's why we've had this impasse. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if it did get to a point where both went, do you know what, fine. However, Derby obviously need to know sooner, because they need to crack on with their own plans. So yeah, I agree that a striker now suddenly becomes quite important. It's hard talking positions though. For me, I don't know what you two think, it's pace that Derby lack, and just get pace in that team. And we can talk about positions later, but the last few games, I don't know why in particular it was the last few games, and maybe it was watching them on TV. Obviously, very privileged as you are, Jason, for half of the games, and maybe the away games. So it's such a different game watching it on TV. It all seems a lot slower on TV anyway. But I'm watching the games and thinking, this Derby team is so slow. And I know possession-based game and all that, I get that. But there was, you look and think, where is the pace? Where's the quick runners in behind? And you looked at the teams that played, the last few teams that Derby played. And okay, you can argue that style suited Forest. Sit back and they've got pace that they can break forward. Cardiff have got the likes of Junior Hoylett and Mendes Lang, players that can go forward quickly. But Derby they don't have any middle. They either have people that are very good on the ball and not offering you much pace, or that's kind of it. Because Tom Lawrence is probably the quickest, but he's not quick. He's not who you'd call quick. He's not a speedster. No. His top speed might be quite nippy, but it takes a while to get there. You look at the youngsters coming through. Jason Knight's not that kind of player. Louis Sibley, again, has a turn of pace, but isn't an out-and-out speedster. Obviously, as strikers, none of them are quick. Chris Martin, Martin Waghorn, Jack Marriott. Again, Marriott when he gets to his full tilt, is pacey, but certainly not over that quick burst. And it would be the times when it would break for Derby in midfield, and you're like, right, go, and nothing would happen.
The game that strikes me, Chris, is West Brom. I was watching that, and it's like West Brom were at walking pace, and they were still miles ahead of like the pace of Derby.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there and I was like yelling at the TV. I was like, why doesn't someone just break into a jog, or anything? And it was just like, oh my God. And I would agree with you. I think pace is the number one thing that would make that team better, because if the way Cocu wants to play with a big target man, he played the ball in, he's got to lay it off.
Yeah.
Let's just say it's Martin, for instance. Martin's got nobody to pass to because nobody's breaking from deep. And the only person that I saw several times this season moving the ball between the lines of play was Dwayne Holmes. And obviously, again, he's quick, but he's not what you would call pacey or a speedster. But there's also very few Derby players that can link between the lines of play, that can pick it up off the back four, run through midfield and get it into the final third or anything. They basically just stop like there's a line there and go, okay, let me look for a pass for the next. Yep, your problem now. And then they look and they're like, I've got no idea, so I'll just hoof a cross in and keeper catches it or whatever.
I think that's a great point. Dwayne Holmes is the only one in that team at the moment. Louis Sibley, maybe you can throw into that category, that looks likely to, as you say, break the lines. Is the football parlance now, isn't it? Because he takes it on the half turn and goes, and that's what Derby lack. It's interesting you talk, Jason, about the five at the back, because you can see it simply because Phillip Cocu has experimented with Jayden Bogle at right midfield, and he scored that wonderful goal against Stoke from a right wing position. And you look and think, okay, Tavarek's coming in. He's by all accounts can play football because he's come through the Dutch school of football. Matt Clark, if he comes back, which might happen, Brighton are quite blessed at the moment with centre backs. However, Ben White, who's also on loan from Brighton, come back from Leeds, is being linked with moves away. It might depend on whether they can get a move for him, although Brighton have just signed Veltman from again another Dutch side, a centre back, which is promising because maybe it means that Matt Clark can go. And of course, Christian Bielik, if you throw him in that three, he used to playing as a defensive mid, is a ball player. And then you think that's a pretty formidable three, I think. Jayden Bogle then has always been a bit susceptible on the defensive side, but you don't have to worry about it too much because he's born to be that right winger. And then left back left wing back is an interesting one. Again, Max Lowe is very good going forward. I think Scott Malone's days are numbered. I think he's one of the Phillip Cocu in Phillip Cocu way, when some players will need a new project. I think we can safely say that Scott Malone is one of those players that will need a new project.
You will find, Chris, that Jason is the Scott Malone fan club chief executive and chairman, sarcastically.
I'm afraid I'm not. I'm afraid I'm not at all.
No, he's
I was so happy when he came in because I actually thought he was a really, really decent left back. And I think we saw it for about 2.5 games of football. Yeah. That's been about it.
There's a reason you look at his career and what is he, 27, 28, and he's had about 11 clubs. And you think, right, there's a reason for that. If every manager is quite happy for you to move on, then there is a reason for that.
Absolutely.
So and then, you know, Lee Buchanan to sign a new deal, maybe he can. He had a difficult time. He obviously started the season, but completely fell away, was usurped by all the other youngsters, but then came back into it at the end. But then you look at it and think, yeah, that's really interesting. Wayne Rooney would suit that role. Max Bird, you can build a team around in that 5, but it does just depend on getting a striker that can play that system. Goalkeeper, yeah, I mean that's a given because obviously Ben Hamer is back to Huddersfield. You can argue if Keller Roos can be the number 1, even if he is, there still needs to be another goalkeeper. And as Eric Steele, who's been with us quite often, has said, the market for goalkeepers is big now. There's a lot of good goalkeepers out there that are out of contract. So Derby just need to choose one, stick with them. Don't think it'll be Joe Hart. I think that the wages there are going to be way too much. And then, yeah, and if you have any sort of, you know, if there's budget left, then, yeah, get yourself some pace and get yourself a winger. It's so difficult to judge. And Phillip Cocu is stressed, which is, again, a measure of the guy. He said, I know it's easy for fans to think, oh, here's a budget, spend it everywhere. But it's so difficult at the moment because, and Phillip Cocu said, I don't want to talk about signings and money when I know that half of our work base is still on furlough. It's irresponsible of me to talk about trying to spend millions on a player when I know that someone like us, like me and you, are working and are on furlough and unsure about their future. And that has to be a consideration. You know, football, and not just Derby, every football club needs to be very wary that we're in such a weird time and clubs just aren't able to spend willy-nilly.
Because it's bad PR, Chris. If you go out and you spend a £10 million signing and you have people, for the lack of a better term, on the dole or on breadlines or furloughed or whatever, you know, sponsors aren't, I know especially here, brands aren't going to want to associate yourself with a club. So you're going to lose money in the long run. It's going to hurt you because sponsors are going to pull out, you know, and because I don't want to be associated with that.
Yeah, completely, and that has to come first. You know, the stability of Derby has to come first, and especially it was rocky anyway, as we know, because of the various sort of dalliances with the EFL. It's even more rocky now. Although the club have said, and you know, Stephen Pearce, the CEO, was on our program a while ago saying, genuinely, it's a concern, and we will have to sort of, you know, be very prudent. But we're in a good position when it comes to lots of other clubs. And having said all of that, of course, you might remember last year, the mood music from the club was very similar. And then suddenly they bring in Christian Bielik for 10 million. And then fans went, oh, but you just said that. So, you know, we don't know. As I say, you could, and Jason Crawley, you'll both know, you line 10 Derby fans up. 5 will say, you know, Mel's done a brilliant job and what a saviour. 5 will go, well, look where the club is now and we'll have to sell our stadium and, you know, it's been mismanaged. And, you know, that's fine. That's a matter of opinion. And Mel accepts that. Although I don't think he's taken any decision against the club, if you know what I mean. I mean, you look at Hull, for instance, and Birmingham and all these clubs where, you know, these rogue owners, you really worry. Whereas with Derby, you know, as a Derby fan, and yes, you can question some of his decisions, but I just don't think you can question why he's taken those decisions. He wants the best. And that was what he decided that would be the best way to go. But yeah, and quickly to come back to your, I think, first point, Jason. Yeah, using the you know, continental market now would be nice to see, instead of just going back to the usual suspects. And Derby tend to overpay for these players anyway because they come at a premium, British players, for whatever reason. But yeah, if Phillip Cocu, and Tavares is encouraging simply because no one had heard of him and it's a Phillip Cocu signing, great. That's perfect. And if we can have, you know, there's a couple more that come through. Might be loans again. Phillip Cocu saying that the loan system could be utilised slightly more successfully than it has been this season. Then good. And I don't think it needs much. If you can get in 3 quality players that really will improve that team, I think that's kind of all you need, because then you have the stardust to take it forward, but also you're not going to dampen down the youngsters coming through. So Max Bird is going to get plenty of games. Louis Sibley will get plenty of game time. Jason Knight likewise. Wayne Rooney with a full pre-season and a season you'd think would still be more than good enough for that level. Then it's a decent team, I think, then to at least be competitive in that league. And as we know, it doesn't take much to click, and who knows. But yeah, goalkeeper, striker, and get Matt Clark back on loan maybe, and then that would be, I think, the three priorities.
So Chris, we talked about this on the last podcast. If you could see, if from your opinion, if Derby, who's going to be a surprise player out the door at Derby that we might not necessarily know about, in your opinion?
Ooh, a surprise player to leave. That's a good one. Well, I mean, and we are expecting it, because Phillip Cocu did say, as we've said, after he said some players will need new projects, he said, players will have to leave. It was followed quickly by, because the natural first question then is, well, who's an asset? Who's going to be a profit for the club? And naturally, you're going to look at the youngsters straight away, and you think, well, who's got that sale value? Max Bird, unquestionably. Louis Sibley, definitely. Jason Knight, yeah, fine. So you look at those, but Phillip Cocu said, no, that's the last resort, is what he said. Last resort, we don't want to sell any youngsters. Some of the senior pros, there's only one that really springs to mind. It's Tom Lawrence that might command a value, and Tom's a frustrating one, because we've seen it with him. He on his day he can be excellent, and it's probably why he's playing in the Championship, because he has days that he's great and days that he isn't so good. And the problem with Tom is that you're always going to carry with him the discipline problem. I think he finished on 11 yellow cards and 1 red for an attacking midfielder, from a player that isn't particularly dirty, is extortionate. And you look back at so many of those yellow cards, and they're stupid. They're utterly ridiculous. They're for either petty fouls or dissent, arguing with the referee. The red card, obviously, for the Matt Miazga incident, just typified the lot. And it was frustrating, because actually you'd thought after his drink drive incident, which did hit him hard, and he knew he made a mistake and was devastated by making that mistake and wanted to make it up. And I think we all agreed did. He got his head down and did play well, didn't court the controversy, played well, scored a couple of good goals, a couple of great goals, actually. Some of the goals, Swansea springs to mind, Huddersfield, fantastic strikes. And he got to a point where he was playing well. So, but then you think clubs will look at that, no question. They'll say, yeah, Tom can do a job for us, but what about his discipline side? So if I was to say, if Derby got a sneaky surprise bid for Tom Lawrence for around, what do they pay for him? I think it was touted as being around 7 million. It probably wasn't that much. So what, 4 or 5 million from Leicester? If they came in with that, wouldn't be surprised if Derby thought, yeah, do you know what? We'll take the cash and run here, because he's 26. So he's no longer a youngster, and he's had his chance with Derby. And has he really kicked on? Maybe not. So I would say, if I was to choose one that someone might come in, then I'd say Tom Lawrence. I think that the ones that will leave, or the Derby will want to leave, will be no surprise to anyone. Scott Malone, Florian Josef soon. One surprise one I'll throw at you, Max Lowe, I don't think is on a firm footing with Phillip Cocu at the moment. I think Max could be one that if someone came in, then he could be on his way. Because I think Phillip Cocu's looking and thinking, I know you run the risk of losing 2 left-backs then if Scott Malone's going, but you're thinking, well, Craig Forsyth has just signed a longish deal. And he is liked by Phillip Cocu. And if Lee Buchanan is what we consider to be the future, and Max has had sort of chances, and he's been in and he's been out and didn't really have too much game time post-lockdown. So I think, yeah, if someone wanted to take him away from Derby, I think that they'd be tempted. But no, I think, yeah, Lawrence would be the one I think they would definitely consider. But as much as we say Derby have to be careful in the transfer window, it's the same for all clubs. And I'd be amazed, actually, if anyone comes in for any of Derby's players with an offer that is too good to be true.
I think he's been reading our script, Corey, because that's exactly, or listen to the last episode, because I think they're pretty much. I certainly came out with Tom Lawrence.
Hey, that's where that extra listen came from, then, Jason.
Yeah,
Thanks,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, for everything that you pointed out there, Chris, out of everybody, if you were going to pick one, and like you say, are many of Derby's players that attractive at this moment in time? I think that can be questioned. There's no doubt about that. And one of my theories was that obviously we know Keogh got sacked. That was a statement from the club. No doubt about that whatsoever. Obviously, Mason Bennett is no longer with us at this moment. Well, he might be back with us at this moment in time, but I can't see his future being with Derby. And I just think Tom Lawrence was one of those players that, like you say, because of what we paid for him, there's no way we could have afforded to have sacked him. And that is my personal opinion. I could be completely wrong, but that's the way it comes across. So he had to be part of the plans. Plus, there was nobody else really there that could play in that position. So we kind of had to until the end of this season. And let's see if anybody does, like you say, I think if anybody comes in, maybe sniffing around, because whilst he did improve around Christmas time and in January, February, I don't think he's not recovered himself from some of the negatives, in my opinion. And I think if a bid was to come in, that would be interesting. And like you say, I think left back, I think that is, again, that it's another position. And I think that ties in with playing three at the back. You can play Craig Forsyth, who was naturally a left midfielder, with somebody who's had 3 ACL injuries. Don't concentrate on your defending. You can get forward. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not the Forsyth of 2014-15, but that lad used to get to the bar line, putting crosses, and that's how Derby scored most of their goals. I was there, I witnessed them, and being able to be given the free range of that, and like you say, with a back three of what you discussed there, if Clark comes in, or Wisdom is probably as good as anybody at the moment if he's fit to start the season. He's done some pretty impressive performances this season, and I think having those types of player at the back, like you say, that can play out with the ball, that stops Rooney needing to come and pick it up off the centre halves, which technically pushes the whole team 10 yards further up front and would aid that formation anyway. So yeah, I think you're right. I think the left-sided, and I think what did you say, Corey? Did you say Bogle for that one?
I did go out with Bogle because I don't necessarily class him as a youngster, Chris, because obviously he's 19, 20 years old, and I like the lad. I think he's a fantastic fullback, but I don't necessarily class him as one of the youngsters anymore because of the amount of games he's played. And I thought, if you've got Wisdom in that position as well, maybe that's an asset because, again, English players come at a premium. He's young. That's a premium. He's a fullback. That's a premium. And Max Aarons did reasonably well in the Premier League, and Bogle's got more championship experience than him. So maybe someone would take a punt on that as well. And would it weaken Derby? Yes, it would, but I don't think it would weaken them as much because they've got Wisdom to put in there. It's not like they have to go out and buy somebody. Oh crap, we got to go replace him. They've got somebody that they can put in. Maybe he's not as good. Maybe he's not as mobile, but they could square peg and square hole right here, in a way. They don't have to necessarily go out and get a replacement.
Yeah, I think Bogle's a good shout, actually, because actually we're talking, if you were to list the players, list the clubs that have been linked to any of Derby's players, as a fact, I think it's only Bogle I can think of, actually.
And I mean, I know Kaku's dropped him a couple times this season as well for various different reasons or what have you. So, and I know one time he said, well, if you're going to sulk on the bench or something like that, that's where you're going to stay, or something like that. And sometimes I read too much into it, like most fans, Chris, and
I think that was, that was the Huddersfield game, wasn't it? When they came on and Toffolo scored for 1-1. And Phillip Cocu said, you have to, you've got to be ready and concentrating for whatever the spell, for whatever moment. But I think Burnley were linked with him, weren't they, at the beginning of the season? And I think maybe Brighton as well. So there's clubs sort of watching Jayden Bogle. I know what you mean. I always, because of the number of games he's played, because he was Frank Lampard's #1 right back last year, you do forget that he is the same age as Max Bird. It maybe even slightly younger than Max, and he is the same age as Jason Knight. And you do forget because of the season that he had last year. So I do give Jayden a little bit of a pass in that regard, because actually you think, wow, I know we all eulogise about Max Bird and Louis Sibley, but you have to say Jayden Bogle is eclipsed them at the moment because he is the starting right back, and yes, has his frustrations. But that's a good one.
All the players do.
Interesting. If one of Burnley or Brighton or whatever to think, we need a young right back and here's some cash, then because I agree. Wisdom can play there. They like it's Jordan Brown, isn't it, the young right back? So he's the next sort of young right back that they've got in the academy. So yeah, they're probably, if they need to sell, or at least a bid comes in that is a little bit tasty for Jayden, then yeah, could well be.
Jason, do you have any more Derby-related questions before we switch and talk about Chris himself?
Do you know? I don't think I have. So yeah, Corey, fire ahead with the interrogation.
Oh no, there'd be far more interesting Derby-related questions than knowing about me, surely.
Oh, see, he's starting to sweat now. He doesn't know what's going to hit him. So, Chris, this is not necessarily Derby-related, but this is, and not necessarily you related. This is kind of that weird gray area. Okay. When you're on the phone and things like that, what is the one thing that frustrates you most that you hear from the fans that you think, why do they think like that? Because that's not what's really going on. We talked about the expectation and things like that. What's the thing? You know, I know often people call it the moaning as well, but you know, when you're getting these calls, what's the one thing that really frustrates you that the fan base continue to mention that you wish kind of they just either let go or realize it in a different light?
Yeah, it's a good one, because there's no question that you do get, whether it be callers that make similar points or maybe one particular caller that makes the same point over a period of 6 months or so. Oh, hang on, my Alexa's kicking into gear here. Alexa, stop. Sorry. Sneaky bit of editing there.
It's all right. I think that set mine off as well, so don't worry about it.
I don't know what she was reminding me about, but anyway, yeah, and there's elements of it that you but obviously, when you're in my position, you're sort of actively encouraging debate and people to be different. From a pure, there's two answers to this really. The one answer I'll always give, what I get a lot, and it's got nothing to do with the football. It is often a barbed comment either on Twitter or on Facebook, and it's, oh, where do they get these people from? And as if that we only let in the people that are going to make stupid points, as if we are inundated with thousands of calls, and the only ones we put to air are the ones that are going to annoy you specifically. Just you, we know, you know. And the nature of a radio phone-in is that if you're going to ring, 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be a negative. It's probably going to be something you want to get off your chest. And it's no secret, when things are going well, it's quiet because people haven't got much to really complain about. When it isn't going well, that's when we are our busiest, and we tend to get people that offer slightly more negative opinions. And then the people that are listening, or just casual listeners on Twitter or on Facebook, I can see why they go, oh God, why do they keep and then obviously it turns into, well, they obviously only do it because they want to cause debate, etc. That gets me a little bit, because it couldn't be further from the truth. You know, if you ring up, you'll get on. It's as simple as that. As long as you're, you know, sort of compos mentis and they're not going to swear on air. The last few weeks, it's changed a little bit actually, because I don't know what's happened. Whether, you know, the summer crowd have come out, but the calls that we've been getting have been slightly more sane and slightly more manageable, and they haven't been offering kind of wild opinions. But certainly that's my frustration with some of the comments when it comes to, yeah, we genuinely, we don't vet calls, you know, we don't just allow the more outrageous statements to come on. And the one that got me, and again, but I can only speak from my year and a half before he was sacked, and I know he causes just an amazing split, is Richard Keogh, because I used to, every week, Derby could have won the game and there'd be 7 or 8 calling for Richard Keogh to be dropped, to be sold, to be stripped of the captaincy. And I could never quite understand it. And yes, I know QPR is always there, and I get that. And I also know that maybe the figure that he was a little bit, you know, split opinion. But I always just looked and thought, he was captained by all of these managers. They can't all be wrong. Not every single one surely can fall into the same mistake. And the argument that always came back at me was, yeah, but look where Derby are. Look where Derby are. So clear. As if, you know, Richard Keogh was the one man responsible for Derby's failure. And I always just thought, it's because he never looked, just quickly, I just think he never looked like the problem he had is that he never looked like a footballer. His running style was so different that he just looked awkward. And that's why when mistakes happen, as we know, when Richard made a mistake, it looked terrible because it would be arms would be all over the place, legs would be up in the air, and when it would be a very Richard Keogh mistake, and I think it would look 10 times worse. But that was the one thing I think, and certainly the back end of the Lampard season things, we used to get it a lot, and I really couldn't believe it. When team suggestions would be made, do you know what? I think it's time to bring Curtis Davies into Park Tamori. I think Richard Keogh has had his time, and I just could never ever understand it. I could accept most other opinions about Derby, but the Keogh one, I never really got.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it in a way, and I'm not comparing the two players, but Lionel Messi at Argentina, he's the captain. So you're going to sit back and say, well, Messi's never won a trophy with Argentina. We should drop him. We should not pick him for Argentina. It's like one of the best players in the world, if not the best. And I'm not saying Richard Keogh and Lionel Messi on the same level, but yeah, it's just weird that there was always this kind of divisive figure. And like you said, he was captain for 7 years or something like that. And he gave everything for the club. And obviously it ended, I don't think it ended anybody the way it wanted it to end. But then I bet 2 weeks after it ended, they were all calling you going, oh, I wish we had Richard Keogh back, which is, the same people, which is bizarre. You want him gone and then he's gone. And then you're like, Christ, we really did miss him. And I think, Jason, you'll agree that Derby did miss Keogh for large swaths of the season.
Well, there was a perception. Jason, very quickly, that Keogh was responsible for sackings of managers too. There was always a rumor that one man has remained throughout all of this, and it's Richard Keogh. And I guess that probably didn't help his detractors probably use that as against him as well.
Yeah, fully. Unpopular opinion, I think Richard Keogh has been one of the best Derby players since he signed. You're quite right, Chris. I listen to the phone in, I hear what they say. And some of them, I think you clearly don't watch the same game of football, because for his faults, and not faults, but there was a strange style. It's just the way that he played. He probably is it 7-8 years ago he signed, something like that, whatever it may well have been. I don't think there's anybody that's wore a Derby shirt with more passion. I don't think there's anybody that really I'd just put 100% of himself into a game. No, but I haven't seen many this season on the touchline diving tackles, diving head, sticking their heads in where it don't hurt. And Richard Keogh did all of that.
Yeah.
And to be fair, until we brought Wisdom into the back line, we struggled for a centre-off who could bring the ball out. Because we know that's what Keogh would do. Some of the look at the goal at Leeds against Ellen Road last season. If it wasn't for Keogh, we might not win that playoff semi-final. So there are always going to be people, and I mean I've actually been one. Yeah, okay, it was Keogh's fault at Wembley. I mean Jake Buxton made a mistake as well for not not putting it in row Z. For somebody who was a non-league footballer and that kind of thing, you taught that at a very young age, just certainly in the 90th minute, get it out of the way. But yeah, I mean, for me, and like you say there, Chris, there's been that many managers and he's had that many centre-half partnerships. He's still one player of the season. He's done all these things. So for me, I mean, it was devastating. I was devastated. I think he did. Obviously, we know this, that he became the scapegoat at Derby. In all fairness, anything that went wrong, and when he was captain, the poor sod got put in front of the media all the time, and you're like, yeah, well, I know obviously at the time Curtis Davies used to get that as well, coming out in front of the media when you've lost. I mean, it is difficult. It is difficult. You probably are hurting and things like And I just always thought Richard Keogh played with a passion that I honestly don't think you see from that many players at Derby, and you haven't over the years, in all fairness. So yeah, it's one of those. But yeah, the phone in, Corey, I don't really know how much you catch it, but I mean, I certainly listen to it near enough most weeks live if I can, or certainly on BBC Sounds. Yeah, some of the calls can be. I can understand why people think they might be screened. I must admit, but yeah, some of the. And it's normally the same people, as you probably noticed, Chris. You do get the same people phoning up week in, week out, or every week or every couple of weeks, and they come out with points, and you're like, okay. And you're like, right. And I must admit, just one gripe for me on it, and I know, obviously, yourself and when Rama did it, and, if Ed's doing it now and things like that, people will phone up and go, oh, what we need is a Kevin Hector-style striker. Yeah. just forget about that. It was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
We're in here and now. Derby aren't champions of England. Derby aren't the best team in the world. It really frustrates me when, I mean, I could say that, but I'm not going to go, well, I can remember when Fabrizio Ravanelli was up front for Derby. You're never going to make that comparison because it was never that good. And I'm not knocking Derby's history, but obviously it's the elder generation that phone up because that's what they've got. And I fully understand that, but football's just a completely different game to what it was 10 years ago, let alone nearly 50 years ago. So, 50 years ago now. Is it 50? Yeah, nearly 50 years ago since Derby won the league. Wow, that's incredible. But yeah,
no, this is it, and this is always the sort of balance that we strike, and I mean, pretty much every season that we've gone right. Is it the end of the phone in now? Do we change it? Do we turn it into more of a like Five Live Monday Night Club? Do we just get 2 or 3 experts in to discuss certain things? And we all think our Friday night preview is similar to that, where we try and get 2 or 3 people in to talk about it. But then I guess I've always thought, no, there needs to be something for the fans to have their say. If we get rid of it altogether, then we're losing. You know, it's important that there needs to be something and for instance, loads of the phone-ins that we've done have been after Keogh got sacked, after Rowett went to Stoke, after Lampard went to, you know, the sort of big moments where you think, no, now is the time for fans to ring, and then it's up to the fans whether they do or not. But you're right, the older generation tend to be the ones that phone in, albeit now that we're sort of stretching into social media and being live on Facebook, we tend to try and tap into a few more of the younger commenters who actually ringing a radio station is completely alien to them because it's just not something that they do. You know, it's a generational thing. And yeah, having a cross section is always useful because you're right, to have someone that goes, oh, you know what, we need a player X, Y, and Z who played in the 1800s is not particularly useful when it comes to we need
Steve Bloomer up top. That's what we need. We need a Steve Bloomer-esque player. Yeah, okay. If they made them, we wouldn't be getting it. So, Chris, I want to switch it a little bit, and I want to talk about you a little bit. I've been in contact with one of our super fans on Twitter, Jake. And apparently, Jason, I don't know if you know this, but I think we need to get the head of recruitment on at Derby, because apparently Chris scored an absolute cracking goal, a screamer, as it was mentioned to me, from 20 yards and 6-a-side. And so I want to know everything about that in detail, Chris.
Oh, wow. Well, out of all the questions Jake could have asked, I'm delighted that he chose that one.
He's asked a few more, Chris.
I was going to say this is the best one. I think he stitched you up a little bit, in all fairness.
Oh, good. Well, because in a whole host of mediocre 6-a-side appearances, that one was certainly a flash in the pan. I closed my eyes and hit it, and then I looked up and it hit the crossbar. And it went in. It was a proper Tony Yeboah. I don't think I've scored a goal. Well, certainly I haven't scored a goal like that ever since. And what he didn't mention is I think it came in a sort of 6-1 defeat. So I couldn't even bask in the glory of winning the game. But he's not a bad player himself, Jake. He's got a decent left foot. I'll give him that. That's
getting you out of a lot of trouble. Unfortunately, he's just paid him a compliment, Jason, and Jake was just not that kind. So Jake wants to know what's his favorite 6-a-side teammate, and why is it Jake?
Oh dear, it's
is it the wand of a left foot, or
his wand of a left foot? He does have a good left foot. He has rescued us a fair few times. The manager, so Chris, has to be the manager, Corey. I can't give Jake the credit. It has to be Jimmy, our manager, is the one. He's the star of the show.
If you were commentating and Jake was playing, what would you say about him as a player?
I'd say he doesn't work hard enough, Corey. He's got all the skill, but he needs to work. He needs to run those channels more. Stop goal hanging and come back and help us older people.
He's one of them glory hunters, that sits offside when there's no offside, exactly. And picks the ball up and then nips it in and celebrates.
Goes and puts one in, and then he thinks his job is done. Come and help out us defensive midfielders that are racing around. Genuinely, he's a very good player. We've not played obviously for such a long time that I think I've forgotten how to kick a ball. But yeah, I'd say Barker on the wing is talented left foot, but needs to up his work rate.
So we've a couple different things here about people that cover Derby. Ryan Conway's big into turtlenecks. Owen Bradley's big into scarves and hats, right? And so I want to talk about your denim hoodie. Do you regret wearing that on BBC Picture Day? Because as Jake said, that's the cover of every show that he does now, is you in that denim hoodie. Let's talk about your love for the hoodie, and do you regret that decision? And I think the answer is no.
Oh, my love for the hoodie. Well, I think the first thing to say is that I genuinely had absolutely no idea that BBC Picture Day fell on the particular day that it was. It was actually the Oldham League Cup game last season. So a random Tuesday night, we were all going up to Greater Manchester. So it was still August, but it was, when you go to Greater Manchester in August, you're never sure. So I remember thinking, right, I need to just make sure that I've got a hoodie to wear. Because I'm on, radio, don't need to look smart. So I genuinely dressed for being in a football stadium. And then we came in, and then, someone said, oh, and by the way, we've got this, don't you know? So, of course, I turn up, and there's Ed and Craig in their gloriously pressed iron white and black shirts, hair done, fresh beards. And then there's me in my denim jacket, with a completely inappropriate shirt under just plain white T-shirt, which I was going to wear. But then the cameraman was like, well, problem is that it's going to look stupid because you've got two shirted people and you're just there in a tee. So I said, well, but then I've only got this denim jacket. He generally said, yeah, but it's character, it's different. At least it's different from the other two, and it says more about you. And I think he's sweet, and he sort of buttoned me up, and I went, yeah, do you know what? That's a good idea. And then completely forgetting that this would be the picture then used sort of forevermore. And I honestly don't own that jacket anymore. I don't know where it is. It left the building about a year ago. So yeah, there's part of me that looks at it and thinks, why? If only I just, could have worn any shirt, and yeah, I wouldn't have been reminded of it often, as I often am. So yeah.
So how did you get into commentary? I know we spoke to Owen Bradley a couple of weeks ago, and he said that it was kind of a career day at school for him. He was always interested in football and things like that. But then that kind of came about. So how did it come about for you in your journey to BBC Radio Derby and being on the radio?
I think football commentary was something that always fascinated me, and it was something that I was always interested in. And, my mum tells a story of which I'm sure is the same for lots of people who go on to be commentators, of turning the sound down of, FIFA or Pro Evolution Soccer and dubbing your own commentary over it. And apparently I was doing this at the age of sort of 7 or 8. And yeah, it's always had that desire to do it. And even, I think a lot of people say, a lot of commentators say that their love of sport is so much that obviously you aspire to become a talent in that field, whether it be football or cricket or tennis. And when they realize that, that obviously the percentage of people that make it into elite level sport is so tiny that you do need another profession to fall back on. And then sports journalism is often that one because, well, I can't play it. So what's the next best thing? Well, probably working in it and being involved with it. But I can honestly say I genuinely don't remember being, even when you're like 9, 10, 11 and thinking, oh, I played football, but not wanting to be a pro footballer. My mind was just set on being a football commentator. So yeah, I think it helped that I had that dream from such an early age that it was straightforward enough of thinking, right, I'll go and study sports journalism at university, which I did, then did a master's in broadcast journalism. My first job was at Birmingham City in their media team, and I spent about 7 or 8 years living in Birmingham and really enjoying it. Spent 2 years at Birmingham City, then worked for the local commercial radio station covering Birmingham and Villa and Wolves and West Brom. Had a brilliant time, loved it. And then 2 or 3 years being freelance, so I got to work for Leicester, got to witness them winning the Premier League incredibly, and going around Europe in the Champions League, which still remains a personal highlight of being able to commentate on Champions League games and a Champions League quarter final, and did lots of other stuff with the BBC, which was great fun. Did lots of their cricket coverage, and then yeah, full-time job came up at Derby, and it was about time to get back into the full-time work. And I knew that sadly this business is shrinking slightly, so to get a full-time job at the BBC was always tough. And a job like this, following a club like Derby, which we're lucky that because I know we have Burton, but we're pretty much a one-club station, so we can dedicate most of our time to Derby. It's got a phenomenal fan base. The fact that we're doing this, and we have Jason here, and we have you, Corey, in America. It's a big club, and and working with such a big club is useful because it just means the interest is always high. And yeah, it's not been dull. I mean, my time, I've been here, what, 2 years, just under, not been dull at all. You know, and poor old Ryan has had it all, isn't he, in his first year? So, so yeah, it's been good fun. Obviously, you know, Ed's the commentator and I present. My desire is still to commentate, and I still see that's where I am in the future. But yeah, the presenting side and just being, you know, having the ability to do the job I do, I'm just very fortunate and very lucky to be in the position. And yeah, it just goes to show that if you have, you know, the dream and desire to do something, then put your mind to it, and anyone can do it, as I've proven.
So what's one thing then that you know, Jason and myself, let's say we're in the car together, we turn the radio on and you come on to do a commentary. What's the one thing that we don't realize that goes on behind the scenes on how much goes into that commentary? What's the one thing that people don't understand about? Because it sounds easy, right? It sounds, oh, I'll play FIFA and I'll just talk over it. Yeah. People sit there and they go, I could do what Chris does, I could do what Ed does, I could do what Bradley does. It's easy. I'm not saying convince me that I'm wrong, because I know that it is difficult. What's the one thing that you wish people knew about how much preparation goes into commentary and things like that?
Yeah, I think there's two things to that, Corey. And the first one I will say is that it's a team game, or even though it's me you hear, or it's Ed you hear, or it's our pundits, there is a team of 2 or 3 people behind us that work amazingly hard to get us to sound like we do. So even before we open our mouths, the work that's gone in before it and the work that carries on throughout the day is just, we wouldn't be able to do what we do without them. You know, from producers to the people that actually press the buttons to make the sounds and to make sure that everything sounds correct. I would still always say that they are the most important part of the team, because, as I say, without them, then we don't do what we do. And I was lucky that I had about 4 or 5 years of doing that job. So I have an appreciation for what they do, and you know, always make sure that, you know, come the end of a broadcast, that I make them fully aware of how appreciative that we are of what they do. So I'd say that that's probably one of the big ones, is that I guess if you're listening, you don't realize how much people there are to make it sound the way it does. And then secondly, yeah, I think that the key to any, certainly broadcast, I think, and radio especially, is that you have to make it sound, the trick is to sound professional and sound like you know what you're doing, but without losing the common touch, to quote that Kipling poem. Because it should be like you're having a conversation like we are now. We should be like we're down the pub, sinking a few pints and talking about Derby. That's exactly what it should be like. But it should come also with that measure of professionalism. But I think that's always, certainly like young broadcasters that are coming through, and I've gone back to university and spoken to the guys, and when they've sent me demos, it's very much, they think we need to sound. There's a way that they need to sound, and you know, Alan Partridge makes this very famous. You know, you just seamlessly slip into. You think that it should be a very kind of, everyone should have the same voice, and everything you say should be really pronounced, because everyone on radio speaks like this. Hello and welcome to Pride Park, and here we are with, and it's not, because if you'd speak through it and you go, that sounds ridiculous. So it's I think one thing I would say is would take some convincing, or at least to try and say this is what is the hardest, is to make it sound like you're listening to a BBC radio program, but you're listening to someone or something that is relatable, and that you're listening along and thinking, yeah, I can hold a conversation, or we can, you know, I can naturally listen to this without thinking I'm listening to the radio. So I think it would be, yeah, the amount of work that goes in to making it seem effortless, if that makes sense. It's making sure that, and actually, one of the things that happens a lot in young commentators, especially, I'm sure you guys have picked it up, is pre-prepared lines are often so obvious. If a commentator has a pre-prepared line and they go with it, you can tell it a mile off. And I get it why commentators do it, because they think, well, this moment's going to be played time and time again, and I need to make sure that I've called it brilliantly. But fans see through it. You look at the Marriott goal against Leeds last season, and Sky's commentator's Daniel Mann, great commentator, but you don't remember him for the big moments. But that goal commentary, you know, just a chance for Marriott now, he's done it. That's fine. You know, fans will remember that line. Nothing sensational about it. It's just the moment and perfect. So I'd always, and what I do is instead of picking lines I like, is if I say something I've said and I listen back and think, God, that sounded awful, then I'll make sure I'll never say it again. So I've got a collection of things that I'll avoid. And you find that the more things you avoid saying, the more natural that you sound, because you are just, that's the whole point, really. You don't want to start trying to throw in words or anything. So, yeah, I'd say the work that goes in is big, but maybe it's not the work that you suspect would go in. Like if you're Ed, obviously you've got to work at your stats and you've got to work at everything. But certainly from a representative point of view, and my point of view, I think it's more, you know, it's how can I sound as natural as possible and as relatable as possible without going OTT and becoming a little bit too, you know, very, very obvious that, you know, this is the way I should speak.
Jason?
I think, yeah, one of the things, I don't know if it is your only time, Chris, but what was it the Leeds game just recently was one of your first match commentaries for Derby?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The full game. I happened to catch it on the podcast, obviously, with the game being on Sky Sports. That's where I watched it. But yeah, I obviously got the podcast after, and it was strange at first. I was like, oh, wasn't quite sure who was commentating actually. And then I realised it was yourself, and I was like, yeah, okay, fair enough. Because I mean, Ed, as I'm sure you'd possibly agree, I think Ed's quite passionate. Obviously, Ed's you know, a Derby fan. He is passionate to that. But that's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about yourself, football wise. Who's your team that you follow?
It's a question that I get asked a lot, and I actually, and I'm gutted about it. I don't have a team. I have a series of teams that I look out for. I was born in Cardiff, and I'm Welsh. I don't have the accent, but Cardiff through and through, except all my mum's side of the family are from Manchester, so they're all Manchester United fans. So when I turned up, I was kind of born into a Manchester United family and did follow United. It was quite easy because they were quite good during the 90s. But then obviously got to an age when I thought, well, I live in Cardiff, never going to watch Manchester United play. Ironically, the one time I did go watch Manchester United, which you pair will love, is at the City Ground when they won, I think, 8-1 against Nottingham Forest, and Solskjaer scored 4 goals. And that's the one time during my youth that I watched Manchester United. So then, obviously, Cardiff, obvious. They were Division 3 at the time, Ninian Park, great ground. It was cheap, you know, so we went along as teenagers to watch Cardiff. So then got into following Cardiff for sort of 4 or 5 years and would call myself a Cardiff fan. But then when I went to university, it coincided with Cardiff going through an unbelievable change. They changed their colour. They went from blue to red. They went from Ninian Park to the Cardiff City Stadium, and they changed their owners. And I just completely lost interest in Cardiff then, which was strange. Like I remember going back about 6 months after I'd been to university, and everything was different. Like the club was different. It was a different club. The stadium obviously was brand new and shiny. They played in red, which was just weird. Obviously, all the players pretty much, I don't know, players and managers change a lot at lots of clubs, but everything was different. And obviously, all the people that I'd been with before, because you get used to it, don't you? I mean, again, you'll know you know the guys next to you.
Yeah. You wonder when he's not turning up. To be honest with you, you think, oh, where's he in seat 5?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the fun of it. And you know, and everyone has the same story. It's you know that there's the person you can't stand 4 rows down to the left who always moans at the referee, always castigates a certain player. But you wouldn't change him for the world because that's what he's there for. You know, he's great. And I went back and I was just, everyone's all over the place. And I genuinely then thought, no, I can't do it. So that was kind of it. So the one side I get behind is Wales, and I go and watch Wales as often as I can. So I was lucky that I went around France when we got to the semi-finals. And, you know, the month and a half was just unbelievable. You know, I returned completely broken and bankrupt, but wouldn't change it for the world because I'd only budgeted for them to get to the round of 16. And then suddenly there we are in the semi-finals. So Wales is my one team. I now have a series of teams. So I always look out for United because that was kind of what was born into me. Cardiff, I will still look out for. I was born there and I still have a soft spot for them. But you know, working in the Midlands, my first job was at Birmingham. I'll look out for Birmingham's results. I'll look out for the Midlands club's results. Obviously now I'll look out for Leicester's results, and I'll certainly now be looking out for Derby's results even long after I've left. So I think in my role it's useful because maybe I can be a little bit more objective and kind of go, well, you know, maybe there's this side that I can offer. But at the same time, I look around and think, oh, I just kind of miss the raw emotion of, for instance, it's easy for me to say, you know, if I'm watching a game with my mates and I've got a couple of big Villa mates and they're watching Villa play, and they're the most sane, reasonable people I could ever wish to meet when it comes to football. We agree on 99%, except when they're watching Aston Villa and they turn into these crazed fans that just seemingly watch a completely different game to me. And then that's the moment I realised that that's what being a fan is all about. And I'm the same when Wales play. After 10 minutes, I will be, get him off the field. Why is he playing that? You know, and I'm thinking, that's me. That's every fan. So yeah, I do kind of wish I did have a club that I could kind of absolutely get behind, but I just circumstance means that I haven't, and I just have Wales and a series of clubs to kind of look out for. So
obviously, I knew you were Welsh. So is it rugby or football for you more?
It's football, definitely. I mean, I'm a huge rugby fan, and again, growing up in Wales, you couldn't get away from it. And you know, you played, you know, much to my hatred, we played rugby 90% of the time in school. You know, we battled to try and get, you know, a PE teacher to play football. But I do like my rugby. But football was always the one, but only because I was born. I think if I was born into, you know, if my mum and dad were both fully Welsh, then it might be different. But obviously, mum being English and my dad being Welsh, I think it was kind of, there was always that 50-50 with football and rugby, and I just happened to fall into the football side. But yeah, definitely football. Unless, of course, you know, when Wales obviously, you know, win the Six Nations and, you know, do well at World Cups, then I'm fully behind the rugby team.
To be perfectly honest with you, we had a Cardiff fan. Obviously, we played Cardiff not so long ago. We had a Cardiff fan on, Nigel, and he has just almost to the letter said 100% exactly the same as what you've just said. You can't get away. I mean, I've worked in Wales. I know certainly Cardiff. I know Cardiff quite well. You can't get away from rugby. You're quite right. Football isn't the main sport over there. But what he did say about rugby is club rugby, not so much. When the national team play, the whole country gets behind. Now, I've had the privilege to actually walk around the Cardiff Blues rugby ground, obviously next to the Millennium Stadium. I've been, but yeah. So I never really thought that it was more just obviously national. You know, for the rugby, it was more national than anything else as a country as a whole. But he was saying again about the same about when obviously the club went through, when Cardiff went through the changes with the kit and the ground, and he said the same. He said, I actually a piece of me for Cardiff went, and he were probably 50 odd years he's been supporting Cardiff. He says, but it just doesn't quite feel the same even now. So we've already had that kind of chat, and we kind of know what that probably obviously feels like for you.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and you always, I think certainly in our profession, you often forget that at the root of all this is people that just love watching their team, but they love everything about it. They love that pre-match anxiety. They love the pre-match superstition. They love going to the local for that first pint. They love seeing the people. The first day of the season for me is always great because at Pride Park, you're in that privileged position of being where we are, right in the middle of the fans in the West Stand, quite close to the dugout. And you look around and you see everyone, and you see that they are genuinely catching up for the first time since the last home game of last season. And it's just great to see. And everywhere there's excited chatter, and you forget that is what is being a football fan. It is the people that you see at the ground. It's the people you travel with to away venues. Yes, it's great, obviously, when the team is doing so well, and it's great to watch. But actually, the heart of it, it's community. It's the camaraderie, and you should never really kind of underestimate that. And that's why this period has been weird, because you take away the fans on the ground, but you take away so much more than that, don't you? You take away everything that comes with it, which is why, yeah, when fans are eventually allowed back in, I think it'll be. It's been, I think, a period where we're guilty of taking it for granted a bit, aren't we? And actually now we've not had it for a bit. I think we're all looking forward to. I'm never gonna get to 5-3 at Pride Park and think, oh, fans are a bit quiet today, aren't they? I'm just, it's just going to be kind of, no. Do you know what? Let's just be grateful for how much the fans gave and do give to football, because you guys sadly are often the last consideration when it comes to anything, whether it be TV broadcast times, season tickets, whatever. It's often the fans that get forgotten. But I think the last 2 months have proven that you lose the fans, you lose the game. So hopefully,
yeah, I agree.
It's
I do agree. It won't take long for Derby fans to turn after they get back in, Chris, I can assure. But certainly, just picking up on one more point, and then I'm gonna let you go because you've been gracious enough to give us this amount of time. You're saying there about getting together, the camaraderie. Obviously, Corey, he does come over every now and again when he can, and me and him have met up. Christ. I think it's 16 years now I've had a season ticket in the South Stand. Well, ever since home fans were allowed in the South Stand, I've had one. And then I was actually in the East Stand before that since 99, I think. So going on. But like you said, there's actually, we're in the South Upper. There's a group of about 16 of us that go, and we occupy 2 rows. And we've had it there for, as I say, 12 years. And in that 12 years, two of the guys that come with us have dropped away. And it just so happens their tickets are in the middle of these 2 rows. So were you saying about, you get back together that first date? We want to know who's brought that season ticket because we never renewed it. So we don't give it one of our friends. So it is just 2 random single seats in the middle of us, of about 16 of us.
Oh, nice.
And it seems to be, I don't know if we've put them off, but it seems to be somebody different every year and has been for 12 years. But you get to know them. And that kind of thing. And in fact, there's one who hasn't been for 3 or 4 years. I know he stopped having one because he couldn't get any more. But I still speak to him now, and I didn't know him from Adam to start off with. So, like you say, the camaraderie of it all and things like that on match days is it's sadly missed from me. There's no doubt about that. And I for one can't wait to get back in. And I'm sorry, nobody can convince me otherwise. Football's not been the same since the restart at all. It's been great, but yeah, it's definitely not been the same. I know that 100%.
Absolutely, and then you've only got to speak to the players and the managers. That I know they were always going to say the fans will be missed, but you're certainly speaking to Philip and the players at Derby. They genuinely mean it, and I know there's always this. It's often quite a nice debate to have when people are like, well, actually, maybe not playing at Pride Park will help some of the youngsters because the fans aren't there. But no, I mean, as some of the players said, and Philip said himself, no, you show me a player that doesn't want to play in front of fans, you won't find one. That's just the part of the reason they do it is to perform and to play in front of supporters. And yes, there will be times when they know that, the fans will be on their backs, but, they take that because they wouldn't have it any other way. And it's that camaraderie and it's the people. I still remember, being at Cardiff when I was about 13 or 14, and Aaron Ramsey had made his debut, 16-year-old, and he was sensational. I still remember the chap, season ticket holder in front of me, one of these people that I was like, I bet he knows everything. I bet he's like, because he'd say like 2 things a game, but they'd be brilliant, and you'd be like, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And we watched Aaron Ramsey play for about 10 minutes. He turned to it must have been nephew, who was about 7 at the time, and he went, son, you watch this kid, because let me tell you, he's not going to be here long, and he's going to be a star. And I thought, well, okay, Aaron Ramsey, I'm going to look out for him. And obviously now, he's one of our best players and now plays for Juventus. But I thought, yeah, I bet every ground has one of those that just, the silent types that are just very wise and don't say anything. But no, it's exactly that. And, where we are, as I say, at Pride Park, we are used to, we know, the people that sit in front of us directly, will always smile and nod and say hello because, they are there every time. And when they're not there, you do think, oh, I wonder where they've gone. And that's why when the cup games roll around, and then the new people sit there, you're like, that's just not the same. It doesn't feel right. So, yeah. Hopefully, I mean, as you say, we have no idea what's going to happen over the next couple of months. But yeah, the sooner fans are back, the better.
Anything more from you, Corey?
No, Chris, what you just said right there is, even for me, when I come every year and I watch 2 or 3 games. I actually had to cancel my trip in October because of the virus. I know we've all had to make sacrifices, but me and Jason met up before the game, and it's like you say, it's that pre-match buzz. Obviously I don't get to experience it every week, but whatever sporting event I'm going to, whether it's football, obviously football is my biggest thing in sporting wise, but whether you go to baseball or NFL or hockey, there's always this buzz around with the stadium. And it's like you say, it's meeting people. Me and Jason were able to meet up. We've been able to strike up a friendship. I've met several other people that we were able to keep in contact. And I remember sitting down, I was at I went to 2 games this past season, Birmingham and Luton. And I was and we sat down, and this old lady, sorry, I didn't mean old lady, this elderly lady, very nice elderly lady. She was sitting there, and we just said, hey, how you doing? And she said, oh, you from America? And we said, yeah. She said, where did you come from? And she traveled all the way from Wales. She traveled from Cardiff to watch Derby, and she has a season ticket. And she's just sitting there eating her sandwich and whatever. And you do kind of get to not necessarily know them, but when you go back and you sit in that same seat the next week afterward, me and you automatically have a bond for some strange reason. Like, me and you might sit together for 90 minutes, and half the things we say are Jesus Christ, stupid referee.
Yeah.
Saturday, and me and you have this really weird but very special relationship and bond, like we've been through this experience. So that I know that's getting a bit existential and a bit weird, but you know what I mean. And that's what it's about. And obviously, I don't go every week, but when you're in there and you get that buzz, it's not going to be the same. And like you say, you wouldn't walk into a stadium and go, oh, that guy's loud, or that guy always is complaining. You just go, thank God there's fans there and stuff. You know, and that's what it's all about. So I can imagine how weird it is for the players and the manager, and obviously for you as well, you know, being there and commentating and different things like that. And it is really weird, but I know what you're saying about that bond, and it's really weird because I only go to a couple games, but you do feel it with people, which is a weird thing. Football is one of those great equalizers where if me and you ran into each other on the street, we might never speak to each other. But all of a sudden, we sit together for 90 minutes or somewhat apart for 90 minutes, and we go, hey, that guy's useless. And they're like, yeah. I mean, I remember being at a game, Giles Barnes did his Achilles in his final game. And I was with my dad. My dad just shouted, don't worry, he'll be out in a boot nightclubbing tonight. And like 4 people turned around and like, yeah, dead on there, man. And it was just one of these things. Like, I don't know why I remember that. That was, 6-7 years ago. But yeah, it's just this weird bond that football brings people together, and that's the really cool thing and fun thing about the game is you can create these awesome friendships and really nice relationships with people.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, and you nail on the head when you said, yeah, you are united by one common theme for 90 minutes at least, and yeah, it's very rare that you get a gathering of 27,000 people in one place.
It's just like you and the phone-in people. You know, you talk to the same people every week on the phone-in, and they keep saying Richard Keogh's crap, and you go, well, he's not in the club anymore. Yeah, well, he's still a waste of time, and he's still a reason why. And you, for some weird you have some weird relationship with this random, you know, Derby fan 55 or whatever who's calling in. You have this weird relationship with him, and you don't really know him. Yeah, and that's the weird thing.
Yeah, and I wouldn't change it. That's the thing. As much as I chastise everything, I know I'd miss him if he stopped making his Richard Keogh points. Because that's the other thing that, you know, the beauty of it is, and when it's done reasonably, which, you know, pleased to say that it always is with us, because, you know, people can have different opinions. Obviously, it'd be boring if they didn't. So as much as I sort of roll my eyes and laugh, I wouldn't want it to be any different because, yeah, it's what makes it so interesting and what makes it so enjoyable and why fans are. You know, it's why you can go to a pub and have a reasoned debate with people, and you shake hands at the end of it and go, well, you know, up the Rams, off we go, and that's it. You know, job done. Yeah, no, as I say, it's proven. Not that it needed proving, but maybe it did a little bit because of everything that money involves nowadays. But yeah, it just shows that, and not just football, any sport, it kind of is all about the fans and the people that make it what it is. So yeah, hopefully, as I say, moving forward, that things are slightly made. Well, at least the fans are considered a bit more than they are at the moment, rather than, well, what time should we move this to TV? Oh, forget the fans. So, but we'll see.
Fingers crossed. Well, Chris, you've given us more than enough of your time. Thank you very much. Obviously, probably a week or two without the mention of football potentially until it all comes back. I'm sure you'll be raring to go. I know me and Corey are ready for a break for 2 weeks. That's for sure. It's been full on, but. Thank you very much for coming on and giving an open and honest conversation about the questions that we've asked you. And it's been Corey. It's been great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it, Jason, for allowing me to be a part of this. And Chris, thanks so much. Sorry for all the Twitter messages the last couple of days, kind of flooding your inbox when you're trying to take a break. But you know, we really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we can speak again soon.
No, absolute pleasure, Jason, Corey. It's been great, and any time, and yeah, and hopefully, Corey, when you come over, give us a shout. We can go for I'd say socially distanced beer, but whatever the regulations are when you come over, we'll do it.
Well, I'm gonna get the sports scene, and I'm gonna call, and I'm gonna just moan in every day. I'm just gonna moan in from now on. That's all we're gonna do. I'm gonna get me and Jake to come on, and we're just gonna make your life a living hell when you're on the air. You know,
I'll do a mile off though, and I'd make sure you didn't get on. I said we've never vetted calls, but we can.
See, he doesn't vet calls, but he does. He does.
Call,
Conspiracy. So, but appreciate it, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really good fun. Really good fun.